Have you ever wondered how a small golden sphere became the most important element in Quidditch? Why this winged ball is worth exactly 150 points and can decide an entire match in a matter of seconds? The story behind the Golden Snitch is much darker and more fascinating than you might imagine. We're talking about extinction, innovation, and a creation that forever changed the world's most popular wizarding sport. Prepare to discover secrets that even the biggest Harry Potter fans don't fully understand. This isn't just the story of a magical object, it's the story of how wizarding humanity nearly destroyed an entire species in the name of entertainment, and how a genius blacksmith both saved the sport and created one of the wizarding world's most revolutionary inventions. Before we dive into this incredible journey through Quidditch history, I need your support. We're on an epic mission to reach 1,000 subscribers on this channel, and each of you makes a difference. If you're as passionate about stories from the wizarding world as I am, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And tell me in the comments, which city are you watching this video from? Now, let's begin this extraordinary journey through the origins of the Golden Snitch. To fully understand the origins of the Golden Snitch, we need to go back in time, long before Harry Potter dreamed of flying on a broomstick. We're talking about the 11th century, when Quidditch was still in its infancy and a completely different sport than we know today. Back then, the game that would become Quidditch was played in a marshy region called Queerditch Marsh. The rules were simple but brutal. Two teams faced off to score points by throwing a ball called a quaffle through magical floating baskets. But there was one element that made it all the more exciting and, as we would discover centuries later, extremely dangerous for the magical ecosystem. This element was a small, bright and extremely agile golden bird known as the Golden Snidget. This was no ordinary bird. It was a magical creature of rare beauty, with feathers that gleamed like pure gold in the sunlight and a flight speed that challenged even the most skilled wizards on broomsticks. The Golden Snidget had unique characteristics that made it perfect for sport, but devastating to its own species. Its agility was legendary, capable of instantaneous changes of direction, flying in impossible patterns, and an astonishing intelligence that allowed it to anticipate hunters' movements. Furthermore, it possessed a territorial instinct that kept it relatively close to its birthplace, facilitating its capture during games always held in the same region. The rule was simple and cruel. The team that managed to capture the Golden Snidget alive during the match earned significant bonus points and often automatic victory. The bird was released at the start of each game, and players had to balance scoring regular points with chasing this elusive creature. But herein lies the first major problem that few Quidditch historians mention. Golden Snidgets weren't just captured during the games. They were injured, extremely stressed, and many died from the trauma of the chase. Those who survived were rarely able to reproduce normally after the traumatic experience. The sport's popularity grew exponentially. From a regional pastime, Quidditch spread throughout Great Britain, then Europe, and eventually the entire wizarding world. With each new region that adopted the sport, new populations of Golden Snidgets were discovered and exploited. Snidget breeders tried to meet the growing demand, but they ran into another fundamental problem. These birds were extremely difficult to breed in captivity. They required very specific conditions to mate, including large territories, a complex diet of specific magical insects, and a stress-free environment, the exact opposite of what they encountered when used in Quidditch matches. For nearly 2 centuries, this practice continued, and what began as a regional sport became a machine of environmental destruction. Professional teams began to emerge, each needing its own supply of Golden Snidgets for training and matches. The pressure on wild populations became unsustainable. Records from the time show that a single professional team could use between 50 and 100 Golden Snidgets in a single season. Multiply that by the hundreds of teams that existed in Europe alone, and you get an idea of the scale of the problem. The 13th century brought the first serious concerns about the Golden Snidget population. Magi zoologists of the time began to notice something alarming. In regions where Quidditch had been played for decades, Snidgets were becoming increasingly rare in the wild. The first official study was conducted by Elfrida Klagg, a pioneering magi zoologist who dedicated her life to the study of magical flying creatures. Her records, preserved in the Magical Library of Alexandria, reveal shocking data. Between 1200 and 1250, the Golden Snidget population had declined by approximately 70% in regions where Quidditch was regularly practiced. But the problem went beyond numbers. Klagg discovered that the Snidgets who survived the games developed abnormal behaviors. Many became aggressive toward other members of their species, lost their natural migratory patterns, and most worryingly, many females stopped laying eggs altogether. The wizarding community at the time, however, was divided. Quidditch organizers argued that the capture was temporary. After all, the birds were released after each game. What they failed to mention was that many Snidgets died of stress days or weeks after being released, or never managed to readapt to life in the wild. A crucial turning point occurred in 1269, during what became known as the Grand Tragic Final. It was the European Quidditch Championships, held in France, and the two finalist teams had trained for months specifically to capture Snidgets. What was supposed to be a celebration became an ecological tragedy. During that match, which lasted an astonishing 15 hours, not one but 7 Golden Snidgets were successively released onto the field, as each previous one was captured. The crowd was ecstatic, but what they didn't see was the behind the scenes. Of the 7 birds used, 5 died of exhaustion during the game. The other 2 survived only a few days. This event shocked even the sport's most ardent enthusiasts. For the first time, the Snidgets' deaths were witnessed by thousands of spectators, including influential members of wizarding society. The pressure for change became inescapable. Elfrida Klagg intensified her research and, in 1274, published what would become known as the Klagg Report, a devastating document that presented irrefutable data on the decline of the species. Her findings included the total Golden Snidget population had declined by 85% in just 75 years. The remaining populations were fragmented and isolated, making breeding even more difficult. Many regions that once harbored hundreds of Snidgets now had none. The Snidgets' diet, based on specific magical insects, was also being affected by the bird population decline, creating a cascading ecological imbalance. Even more alarming, Klagg discovered that Snidgets played a crucial role in the magical ecosystem that no one had previously realized. They were pollinators of several important magical plants, including some used in essential medicinal potions. Their extinction would not only mean the loss of a beautiful creature, it would mean the collapse of an entire ecological system. The report caused an unprecedented uproar in the wizarding community. Protests erupted at Quidditch stadiums across Europe. Magi-zoologist groups demanded an immediate ban on the use of Snidgets in games. Political pressure grew so strong that the newly formed English Ministry of Magic was forced to act. In 1275, just 1 year after the publication of the Klagg Report, the first Protection of Magical Creatures Act in history was passed. The document, surprisingly progressive for its time, declared the Golden Snidget a protected species and prohibited its capture, sale, or use in any form of entertainment. The law was a landmark, but it created a huge problem. How could Quidditch continue to exist without its most exciting element? The sport was on the brink of collapse. Entire teams were disbanded, stadiums closed, and thousands of people lost their jobs. The crisis was economic, social, and cultural. It was in this moment of despair that an unlikely hero emerged, a talented blacksmith from a small village called Godric's Hollow. Bowman Wright was not a household name in the sporting or aristocratic circles of 13th century wizarding society. He was simply a skilled blacksmith who lived in Godric's Hollow, a small community that would later become famous as the birthplace of Godric Gryffindor, and centuries later where Harry Potter would spend his early years. But Wright possessed something that set him apart from ordinary blacksmiths, a brilliant mind for invention and a passion for Quidditch that rivaled his skill in metalworking. He had grown up watching local games and was fascinated not only by the thrill of competition, but also by the effortless elegance of the Golden Snidget's flight. When the Protection Act was passed in 1275, Wright saw not just a crisis, but an opportunity. He had spent years observing Snidgets during games, studying their flight patterns, evasive maneuvers, and incredible agility. Most importantly, he understood that what made Quidditch exciting wasn't necessarily the fact that it was a live animal, but rather the challenge of capturing something nearly impossible to catch. Wright began his experiments in his workshop at the back of his house. His first prototypes were rudimentary, simple metal spheres enchanted to fly in random patterns, but they didn't capture the essence of what made Snidget special. Something fundamental was missing. The breakthrough came when Wright realized it wasn't enough to replicate movement. He needed to replicate intelligence. Snidgets didn't fly randomly. They reacted to players' movements, anticipated capture attempts, and developed their own strategies during the game. They had personalities. For 3 years, Wright worked obsessively on his project. He studied not only flight patterns, but also hunting psychology. He consulted magizoologists, spoke with former Quidditch players, and even secured special permission to observe some of the last Snidgets in captivity at a conservation sanctuary. His notes from this period, discovered centuries later during renovations at Godric's Hollow, reveal the depth of his research. He had catalogued over 200 different flight patterns, identified 17 distinct, evasive strategies, and even developed a theory about how Snidgets read players' intentions through micro-body movements. Wright's project involved some of the most complex magic ever applied to an inanimate object up to that time. First, he had to solve the problem of propulsion. The wings couldn't be merely decorative. They needed to function like real wings, generating lift and allowing precise maneuvers. To achieve this, he developed a system of enchantments that synchronized the wing's movement with magical trajectory corrections. Second, he faced the challenge of magical artificial intelligence. The snitch needed to be able to react to players' movements in a seemingly intelligent manner, but without possessing actual consciousness, which would be ethically problematic. Wright created a complex system of conditional spells that gave the snitch the ability to learn during play, becoming more difficult to capture as the match progressed. Third, there was the issue of durability. Snidgets were fragile and frequently injured during capture attempts. Wright's snitch needed to be tough enough to withstand rough handling without losing its functionality. Finally, and perhaps most crucially, Wright implemented what he called flesh memory. This was his most ingenious invention and also his most controversial. The snitch would be able to remember the first human touch it received, creating a unique connection between the object and the person. This feature not only added a poetic element to the game, but also had important practical applications for refereeing. The first official test of Wright's Golden Snitch took place in 1278, during a trial match between two local teams from Godric's Hollow. The result exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. The snitch flew with the grace of a real Snidget, reacted intelligently to capture attempts, and provided a gaming experience as thrilling as the Snidgets, but without any ecological cost. The news spread quickly throughout the Quidditch world. Within months, delegations from across Europe descended on Godric's Hollow to witness Wright's invention. The feedback was unanimously positive, with many commenting that the artificial snitch actually offered a more consistent playing experience than real snidgets, whose behavior could vary dramatically depending on their mood and physical condition. Wright immediately began mass production, but faced unique challenges. Each snitch needed to be individually crafted, with enchantments applied by hand. The process took approximately a week per snitch, and Wright was the only one with complete knowledge of the technique. Realizing he couldn't meet demand alone, Wright made a decision many considered strange at the time. He decided to train other craftsmen in his technique, but refused to patent his invention. His philosophy was that Quidditch belonged to all wizards, and his invention should be available to anyone who wanted to continue playing the sport. This generous decision had profound consequences. Golden Snitch workshops began to appear throughout the wizarding world, each adding their own improvements and refinements to Wright's original invention. The snitch quickly evolved, becoming not just a replacement for the Snidgets, but a significant improvement on the original game. Wright's invention didn't just save Quidditch, it completely revolutionized it. In the years following the official introduction of the Golden Snitch, the sport underwent fundamental changes that transformed it into the form we know today. The first major change was the game's consistency. With real Snidgets, each match was unpredictable, not only due to the player's skill, but also due to each bird's individual temperament. Some Snidgets were naturally more aggressive and difficult to capture, while others were more docile. This variability, while exciting, made it difficult to compare performances between different games or seasons. The Golden Snitch standardized the experience. Each snitch was calibrated to offer the same level of challenge, allowing victories to be truly based on player skill rather than the luck of catching a particularly slow or fast Snidget. This change was fundamental to the development of Quidditch as a serious professional sport. The second revolution was in player safety. When cornered, Snidgets sometimes became aggressive, using their sharp beaks to attack players who tried to capture them. Injuries were common, and some promising careers were cut short due to injuries caused by panicked Snidgets. The Golden Snitch completely eliminated this risk. Even when caught with excessive force, the object posed no danger to players. This increased safety allowed players to adopt more aggressive and risky tactics in their snitch hunt, raising the game's technical level. But perhaps the most significant innovation was the introduction of the concept of flesh memory. This unique characteristic of the Golden Snitch had no equivalent in real Snidgets and opened up entirely new possibilities for the sport. The flesh memory worked through a complex enchantment that allowed the snitch to magically record the impression of the first person who touched it after its activation. This recording included not only the physical impression, but also a kind of magical signature unique to each individual. From a sporting perspective, this meant that the snitch himself could witness who had touched him first, eliminating controversies that sometimes resulted in stadium riots. But the implications of flesh memory went far beyond sport. Wright had inadvertently created one of the most sophisticated magical security devices of his time. A snitch that knew its owner could be used to verify identity, detect attempted fraud, and even as a primitive form of magical paternity testing. During the first years after the Golden Snitches were introduced, constant experimentation led to significant refinements. Craftsmen from different regions developed specialized variations, faster snitches for advanced players, slower, more predictable training versions, and even decorative snitches that didn't fly but displayed hypnotic movement patterns for aesthetic purposes. One of the most important improvements was the development of the magical magnetic field system. Early snitches had a troublesome tendency to fly off the playing field. Wright and his successors developed enchantments that created an invisible barrier around the playing field, keeping the snitch within its established boundaries without significantly restricting its freedom of movement. Another crucial innovation was the standardization of specifications. In 1285, just 7 years after the first public demonstration, the International Quidditch Council established official regulations for golden snitches. They were to be exactly the same size and weight as an average adult Golden Snidget, fly at comparable speeds, and respond to the same types of control charms used by referees. This standardization was essential for the development of international competitions. For the first time in history, it was possible to hold truly fair championships between teams from different countries, knowing that everyone would face exactly the same challenge in capturing the snitch. The economic impact of Wright's invention was also revolutionary. The Snidget breeding industry, which had collapsed due to protection laws, was replaced by a flourishing snitch manufacturing industry. Hundreds of new jobs were created, from skilled craftsmen to enchanters who applied the complex spells needed to bring objects to life. Furthermore, the snitch's durability meant they could be reused indefinitely, provided they were properly maintained. This made Quidditch much more accessible to smaller, less privileged communities, who previously couldn't afford the constant cost of purchasing new Snidgets for each season. The technical revolution also allowed the development of regional variations of the sport that simply weren't possible with real Snidgets. In mountainous regions, snitches capable of flying at extreme altitudes were developed. In areas with harsh climates, weather-resistant versions allowed games to be played in conditions that would have been lethal for real birds. The Golden Snitch's most fascinating and mysterious feature has always been its flesh memory. This unique function, created by Bowman Wright, has proven to be far more complex and versatile than even its inventor had initially imagined. To fully understand flesh memory, we must delve into the magical theory behind its creation. Wright based this enchantment on advanced research into the nature of individual magical identity. Every witch and wizard possesses what magical theorists call a thaumaturgical signature, a unique combination of magical energy, physical traits, and psychological characteristics that is impossible to fake or duplicate. When the Golden Snitch first touches a person's bare skin, it not only registers the physical impression, but also captures and stores this complete thaumaturgical signature. The process is instantaneous and irreversible. Once a snitch knows someone, that information remains etched into its magical structure forever. What makes flesh memory truly remarkable is its absolute precision. Even decades after first contact, a snitch can instantly identify the person who originally touched it, even if that person has aged, physically changed, or even attempted to disguise their identity through polypotion or other magical transformation methods. During the early years of Snitch's use, this feature was seen primarily as an interesting curiosity and a useful tool for settling sporting disputes. But it soon became clear that Wright had accidentally created one of the wizarding world's most advanced security technologies. It was this particular property of flesh memory that centuries later, Albus Dumbledore would exploit to create one of the most ingenious fail-safes in modern magical history. During his research on the Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore realized that flesh memory could be used not only for identification, but also as an extremely specific release mechanism. He theorized that a properly programmed snitch could be configured to respond not only to a specific person's touch, but also to that person's specific actions or intentions. This theory led Dumbledore to develop what he called the conditional release charm, a modification of the standard flesh memory that allowed the snitch to respond to specific behavioral or emotional triggers beyond simple identity recognition. The first test of this advanced technology was conducted at Hogwarts, using a snitch that Dumbledore had personally enchanted to respond only to Harry Potter, and only when Harry demonstrated a genuine acceptance of self-sacrifice. The test was successful, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most crucial strategies in defeating Voldemort. The story of the Golden Snitch reaches its most moving and meaningful climax through its connection to Harry Potter and the final events of the Second Wizarding War. What began as an invention to save a sport became instrumental in saving the entire wizarding world. Albus Dumbledore, with his deep understanding of both ancient magic and modern innovations, recognized the Golden Snitch as the perfect vehicle for his most complex and crucial plans. His choice was no accident. It represented the culmination of centuries of magical development, from Wright's original invention to the most advanced refinements of flesh memory. The snitch Dumbledore chose for his purposes had a fascinating history of its own. It was the first golden snitch Harry Potter had caught during his first Quidditch match at Hogwarts. This detail was no coincidence, but a deliberate and deeply meaningful choice on the part of the Hogwarts headmaster. Dumbledore understood that the snitch's flesh memory had recorded not only Harry's physical identity, but also the exact moment of his capture, a moment of sheer determination, courage, and protective instinct. Harry had captured that snitch under extraordinary circumstances, nearly swallowing it in his urgency to win and protect his home at Hogwarts. Most importantly, Dumbledore knew that Harry had touched the snitch with his lips, a more intimate and personal contact than the usual hand-to-hand touch. This form of contact created an even deeper and more specific flesh memory impression, allowing Dumbledore to program the snitch to respond to an equally intimate gesture: a kiss. But the true genius of Dumbledore's plan lay in the message engraved on the snitch: "I open at the close." This enigmatic phrase perfectly encapsulated the paradoxical nature of the sacrifice Harry would have to make. To open, to access the power necessary to defeat Voldemort, Harry would first have to close, accept his own apparent death. The moment Harry finally kissed the snitch in the Forbidden Forest represents one of the most sophisticated uses of flesh memory ever recorded in magical history. The snitch not only recognized Harry through his magical signature, but also detected his genuine intention of self-sacrifice, the specific emotional trigger Dumbledore had programmed. When the snitch opened, revealing the resurrection stone, it demonstrated an application of flesh memory that Wright could never have imagined. The object had become not just a repository of identity, but a guardian of intentions, capable of distinguishing between different emotional and mental states within the same person. The forest scene also illustrates another fascinating aspect of flesh memory: its ability to evoke memories and emotions from the past. When Harry held the snitch, he not only remembered his first capture, but relived the entire emotional experience of that moment. The adrenaline, the fear, the determination, and the sense of belonging he felt at Hogwarts. This emotional connection was crucial in giving Harry the strength he needed to face Voldemort. The snitch had become an anchor to his identity, reminding him of who he was and what he was fighting for, even in his most desperate moments. After Voldemort's defeat, the snitch wielded by Dumbledore became one of the most studied and revered relics in the wizarding world. Researchers from around the world came to study its unique properties, leading to significant advances in understanding flesh memory and its potential applications. But perhaps the most lasting impact of Wright's invention is philosophical. The concept of flesh memory fundamentally changed how the magical world understands the nature of identity and personal continuity. It proved that our individual essence can be captured and preserved in ways that transcend physical death. This understanding had profound implications for beliefs about the afterlife, the nature of the soul, and the possibility of forms of immortality that don't rely on dark magic like Horcruxes. In many ways, Wright anticipated by centuries concepts that were only fully understood during the events of the war against Voldemort. Today, when we watch a Quidditch match and see the Golden Snitch dancing through the air, we are witnessing not just a moment of sports entertainment, but the culmination of an extraordinary journey through magical history. From the first Golden Snidget soaring over the marshes, through the ecological crisis that nearly destroyed a species, to the ingenious invention that saved a sport and then helped save the world, the story of the Golden Snitch is truly one of the most fascinating narratives in the entire magical universe. And so we come to the end of this extraordinary journey through the history of the Golden Snitch. What began as an ecological crisis in the 13th century became one of the most important inventions in magical history, saving not only a sport, but also contributing decisively to the salvation of the wizarding world centuries later. The story of the Golden Snitch teaches us valuable lessons about innovation, environmental responsibility, and how creative solutions can emerge from the most difficult challenges. Bowman Wright didn't just solve a problem, he created something better than what existed before, demonstrating that true progress doesn't simply mean replacing the old, but rather evolving into something superior. More profoundly, this story illustrates how seemingly simple inventions can have impacts that extend far beyond their original purpose. Wright created the snitch to save Quidditch, but it ended up revolutionizing concepts of identity, magical security, and even our understanding of the nature of the human soul. The next time you watch a Quidditch match or read about the adventures of Harry Potter, remember the incredible journey that brought that little golden sphere into existence. Behind every graceful flight, every thrilling capture, lies a story of near extinction, brilliant innovation, and proof that even the most complex problems can find solutions through human creativity and determination. The Golden Snitch remains flying in our hearts and imaginations, an enduring symbol that the most powerful magic often comes not from complex spells or elaborate potions, but from the human capacity to turn crisis into opportunity and problem into progress. This is the true magic of the Golden Snitch, not just its ability to fly or remember, but its ability to inspire us to seek creative solutions to the challenges we face, whether athletic, environmental, or existential. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson we can learn from this extraordinary story. And we've reached the end of this incredible journey into the origins of the Golden Snitch. If you were as captivated by this story as I was, don't forget to like the video. It really helps me continue bringing you unique content about the magical universe. Haven't subscribed to the channel yet? Then hit that subscribe button right now. We're almost reaching 1,000 subscribers, and each of you makes all the difference in this mission. Share this video with your Harry Potter-loving friends. I'm sure they'll love discovering the secrets behind this iconic object. And tell me in the comments, what part of the story impressed you most? Was it the near extinction of the Golden Snidgets, the genius of Bowman Wright, or the epic connection to Harry Potter? Until the next adventure, and remember, the true magic is in the details that few know.